Welcome back to another Medtech Snapshot, the one question, one answer digest podcast. With me today is Stephenie Goddard, CEO of Glidewell Labs. Stephenie and I are going to be chatting through some interesting topics today. One, navigating atypical careers and how you transition through that process ultimately to become CEO. We're also going to cover what is the actual life and kind of day in and day out look like for a CEO. So make sure you stay tuned. We also have a surprise question for her. Stephenie, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I'm excited for the questions.
We'll
see if I have good answers.
Yeah, we'll take it easy on you.
Thank you.
Hey, one of the things that I'd love for us to get into as the first question here really is just, how did you find yourself ultimately in your career as a CEO? I think a lot of that transition, kind of career progression sometimes is tough for people to understand. And you have a really interesting career background going from PwC as a human capital consultant, but you've now been with Glidewell for 19 years. That's pretty atypical. So what I'd love to learn is just, you've gone from within Glidewell, HR, to business ops, to chief experience officer, and now CEO. So can you kind of walk us through that transition and how all of those different roles within the job that you've done from PwC to Glidewell now help prepare you for your current role today as CEO?
Well, first of all, you gave away my age because clearly I wanted to say I started when I was 18 and at 19 years later, but no.
Naturally.
Actually. People forget I actually had a really long, pretty successful career pre-Glidewell, so before my 19 years here. But yeah, I have a very atypical, I think, background to becoming a CEO, especially CEO of a med device company. So, my background is really industrial psychology. That's what my master's is in. So it's really the study of human behavior in organizations, right? So if you think about it from that perspective, it's like, oh, okay, maybe that makes sense for somebody to be a leader and have this sort of background. But yeah, I was at Pricewaterhouse. I did human capital consulting, strategy, performance management, those kinds of things. Went to the World Bank and kind of, people think, oh, your background is in finance or accounting, but no, I kind of did the same types of things inside the World Bank, just as an internal consultant. And then I came to Glidewell to be the VP of HR. And I didn't have sort of the traditional HR background. I didn't really know a little bit about the rules, but I didn't know everything about it. But really, they were looking for somebody who had more of a change management background, not a strong HR background. And I think it set me up for success because not having sort of that, black and white focus of you have to do this or you have to do that. But as a consultant, you're always saying, what is it that you want to do? What do you want to achieve? And then my job is to help figure out the way to get there. Right.
Right.
And that's really how I approached HR is, okay, where do we see the company? When I started, we were 1,100 employees. 19 years later, we're almost 5,000 employees. So
wow.
The COO at the time knew that he wanted to go on a growth trajectory and reposition the company as not just a dental lab, but as a med device company. So really around that time, it's not that we aren't a lab, we're still the largest lab globally from a dental prosthetic perspective, like making crowns and dentures and those things. But we also pivoted heavily into med device manufacturing. So making materials, making software, making equipment that dentists can use to make their prosthetics. And so that pivot and change, they knew that organizationally they needed sort of a different type of leadership or new types of leadership entering the organization. And how do you facilitate that? So I think because I had that background, it set me up really well to be, VP of HR, then move into VP of business ops and then customer experience. And so, the question I get from people is, how do you prepare to be CEO? And, or how did you do it? And I think the thing that's so great about my story is there's no one path, right? Like you can sort of chart your own path and it's really up to you, but it's also, some of it's a little bit of right place, right time, right circumstances too. And if you kind of build the stepping stones to get there, when that right place, right time happens, maybe you'll be sort of like, recognized as being the next one to be in that position.
Well, I also look at it too as you took on new challenges
Yeah.
over these 19 years. As we mentioned a moment ago, you went from HR into business ops, a different role, then into the chief experience officer, CXO. That's a very different role. So each time you're really having to fine tune your craft while learning a different part of the business, which you could argue each step of the way is preparing you for a future something that may not be visible in that moment.
Right. Yeah. And I think, that's one of the things I see women do more frequently than men is they'll say, I don't know anything about that topic, or, I'm not qualified for that next position. And they truly taking on like business operations. I didn't know anything about regulatory affairs or the FDA, but I didn't sort of let them hold me back. I mean, my approach was, well, I figured out HR in California, which is, I had come from DC, Washington, DC, and I'm like, HR in California is pretty complicated. And if I can figure that out, then I can surely figure out sort of FDA rules and regulations, which are written, and I can hire really good people who can help me navigate it. And so if sometimes I like to say I know enough to be dangerous in every sort of part of the organization, right? But you have to know enough to ask the right questions. And I've just never seen sort of learning as something that I'm afraid of. I'm sort of a lifelong learner. I love to learn new things, and I love having really smart people around me who can teach me those things that I don't know about. And I think that's where some people get hung up is, and like I said, I think more specifically women, I'll see them sort of hold themselves back in a career because they think, I don't know enough to be able to do that.
Well, I know this book has been around for a while, but Sheryl Sandberg had wrote whatever that was 15 years ago, Lean In. And that was one of the biggest items that came out of that book was that awareness on just being able to say yes, right? Because you'll figure it out along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the other thing too is you see this when people, they don't want to admit that they don't know something. And I think sometimes the most powerful thing you can do as a leader is to admit openly to people, hey, I don't know enough about this topic. Can you teach me? And I think, by doing that, you create an environment where people can admit when they don't know something. And I think that's the most powerful. You don't want to have people showing up in a room pretending that they know about something and, giving advice on something that they truly don't know about. And then you end up in the wrong direction. I'd much rather have people say, we don't know enough about this. Let's go back and do some research, or let's find an expert who can help us down this path and figure out where we're going. And then, like I said, I love to hire people to work for me who know, who are experts in their field that I know nothing about or I know a little bit about, because I learned so much from them. And I don't see that as a weakness. I see that as a strength to build your team with people around you who know more than you. You should. As a CEO, if you know every little aspect of every part of the business, like to the point that you can run that part of the business by yourself with your eyes, like I think that's a problem. Like if that's how you're trying to run your organization.